There is someone in your life right now who is trying very hard not to think about you, and they are failing, not because they are weak, not because they lack willpower, but because of something far deeper, something that operates beneath the level of conscious choice, beneath the surface of what any of us can simply decide to do or not do. Carl Jung once wrote that what we do not make conscious appears in our life as fate, and what I am about to tell you about the psychology of forgetting, about what actually happens inside the mind of someone who is trying to erase you, will completely change how you understand this situation you are in right now. Because the truth is, you cannot be forgotten by someone who felt something real. And once you understand why, the silence, the distance, the cold behavior, none of it will feel the same. You did not find this video by accident. Something brought you here. A name you keep returning to in your mind. A relationship that ended without resolution. A person who walked away but somehow still feels present. A connection that has gone quiet but has not gone cold. There is a reason this is happening at this exact moment in your life. Carl Jung spent decades studying the invisible architecture of human relationships. He was fascinated by the things people could not explain about each other. Why we are drawn to certain people. Why some connections refuse to die even when both parties try to let go. Why certain people haunt us not because we are weak, but because something between two people has not yet finished its work. And what Jung discovered about the psychology of suppression, of deliberate forgetting, of conscious distance, will reveal something about this person in your life that you may have been sensing, but could never fully articulate. Welcome to the Shadow Self. If this message resonates with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the deeper meanings behind human behavior. Let us begin with the thing most people get completely wrong about distance. When someone pulls away from you, when they go silent, when they seem to be building a wall between themselves and the memory of what you shared, the natural human instinct is to interpret that as indifference. We think if they cared, they would reach out. If it meant something, they would not be able to simply disappear. The silence must mean they have moved on. The distance must mean it was never that important. But Carl Jung understood something about human psychology that turns this entire interpretation on its head. Jung discovered through decades of clinical work that suppression does not erase emotion. It amplifies it. The mind does not work like a blackboard that can simply be wiped clean. When we try to suppress a feeling, when we make the conscious decision to push something down, to not think about it, to move on, what we are actually doing is driving that feeling deeper into the unconscious. And in the unconscious, it grows. Jung called this the mechanism of the shadow self. The shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. The emotions we decide are too inconvenient. The desires we tell ourselves are not appropriate. The connections we try to convince ourselves do not matter as much as they do. And here is what makes this psychologically significant for you. When someone is trying hard to forget you, when they are actively putting effort into not thinking about you, that effort itself is evidence of how deeply you are embedded in their inner world. You do not work hard to forget things that never mattered. There's a psychological experiment that reveals something uncomfortable about how the human mind actually functions. Tell someone not to think about something specific. Tell them to simply push it out of their mind. What happens almost immediately is the opposite of the instruction. The thought intensifies. It becomes more present, not less. Psychologists call this ironic process theory. The mind, in monitoring itself to ensure the suppressed thought does not surface, must continually hold that thought in a kind of background awareness. To make sure you are not thinking about something, you must keep thinking about it. This is not a flaw in human psychology. It is a fundamental feature of how consciousness works. And Carl Jung understood this, not just as a quirk of cognition, but as a profound truth about emotional reality. When someone in your life has decided they need to stop thinking about you, when they have made that conscious decision, they have unknowingly activated a psychological loop that keeps you more present in their mind than almost anything else in their daily life. You become the thought they cannot escape, because you are the thought they are most actively trying to escape. But why would someone choose this path? Why would someone decide to forget rather than confront what they feel? This is where Jung's understanding of psychological resistance becomes essential. The person who is trying to forget you is not at peace. I want you to really sit with that for a moment, because the behavior from the outside can look very much like peace. The silence can look like they have simply moved on. The distance can look like indifference. The apparent absence of feeling can look like closure. But inside, Jung's work reveals there is a very different reality. There is conflict, the kind of deep, quiet, persistent inner conflict that comes when the conscious mind wants one thing and the unconscious insists on another. The conscious mind says, "This is not practical. This is not the right time. This connection complicates things. I need to be rational. I need to move forward. I need to not feel this." But the unconscious does not respond to rational instruction. It does not recognize practical considerations. It does not follow the plans we lay out for ourselves. The unconscious responds to truth. And the truth, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how complicated, no matter how frightening, is that this person felt something real when they were with you. They are not distant because they feel nothing. They are distant because they feel something they do not know how to handle. Carl Jung would say this person is in conflict with their own shadow. They are experiencing what he called psychological resistance, the internal force that arises when we come face to face with something in ourselves that challenges the story we have been telling ourselves about who we are and what we need. Maybe they have told themselves they are not ready for the depth of what they felt with you. Maybe the intensity of the connection frightened them. Maybe acknowledging you would require acknowledging things about themselves that feel too exposing, too vulnerable, too true. And so they run, not from you, but from themselves. Carl Jung wrote something that the moment you truly understand it, the silence of another person will never confuse you the same way again. He said, "What you resist persists." 3 words, an entire psychology. What we push away does not disappear. What we refuse to feel does not dissolve. What we decide we will not think about does not quietly retire from our inner life. It stays. It waits. It grows. Jung observed this in his clinical work with patients who were trying to suppress grief, desire, guilt, or longing. The harder they worked to contain these feelings, the more forcefully those feelings eventually pressed back into consciousness. Suppression is not the same as resolution. It is not the same as healing. It is not even the same as moving on. Suppression is simply postponement. And when we suppress something as powerful as a genuine human connection, something that touched us in a real way. What we are doing is creating a psychological debt that the unconscious mind will eventually demand be paid. This means something important for you and your situation. The person who is trying to forget you has not resolved what they feel. They have stored it. And stored emotion, particularly suppressed emotion connected to a real and meaningful person, does not age. It does not weaken with time. If anything, it becomes more concentrated, more vivid, more impossible to ignore. You have probably noticed something strange about this person even through the distance. There are moments when you think about them suddenly, unexpectedly, for no particular reason that you can identify. Not because something reminded you of them. Not because you were already in a reflective mood. Just suddenly they are there in your mind. Jung had a concept for this that sits at the intersection of psychology and something far less easily explained. He spoke about the reality of psychic connection between individuals who share a genuine emotional history. Not in a mystical sense that dismisses rational understanding, but in a deeply observed, clinically noted sense that some connections operate through channels beyond ordinary conscious communication. When two people have shared something real, they become linked in the unconscious landscape of each other's inner world. And that linkage does not dissolve simply because one party decides it should. The unexpected thoughts, the strange sense that someone is thinking about you, the feeling of unfinished energy around a relationship that has gone quiet. These are not illusions. They are not wishful thinking. They are the natural result of what Jung called the incomplete psychological process between two people. Relationships that end without resolution, connections that are suppressed rather than integrated, emotions that are abandoned rather than understood. These leave what Jung described as open psychological circuits, and open circuits have a way of seeking completion. The restlessness you may feel around this situation, the inability to simply let it go and feel entirely at peace with that, the sense that something unresolved is still present, even when you cannot rationally explain it. That is not weakness. That is the accurate perception of an incomplete process. The other person feels it too. They simply lack the language for it, or they are too afraid of what naming it would require of them. Some connections do not exist to give us what we consciously think we want from them. Some connections exist to awaken us. Carl Jung believed deeply in the transformative purpose of significant relationships. He understood that the people who move us most, who trouble us most, who stay in our minds despite all efforts to release them, these are rarely accidental encounters. They arrive in our lives as what Jung called the carrier of the projection, a person onto whom we have placed some essential truth about ourselves that we had not yet been able to see directly. In simpler terms, the people we cannot forget are often the people who showed us something about ourselves that we had not yet been ready to fully see. The connection you had with this person may have awakened in you a capacity for depth that you did not fully know you possessed, a capacity for vulnerability, a willingness to be known, a hunger for something genuine in a world that often rewards the surface, and that awakening does not depend on what this other person chooses to do next. It is already yours. Jung would say that this is the gift concealed within even the most painful relational experiences. The people who disturb us most, who reach us most deeply, who we struggle most to release from our inner world, they are our most potent teachers, not because of what they did or did not choose, but because of what knowing them revealed in us. The question worth sitting with is not why are they trying to forget me? The deeper question is, what did this connection awaken in me that I am now being asked to understand? Here is something that may surprise you about the person who is maintaining this distance. They are changing too. It may not be visible from where you stand. It may not look like growth from the outside. In fact, from the outside, it may look like nothing is happening at all. But Jung understood that some of the most significant psychological transformation occurs in the places that look most still, beneath the surface of someone who is trying to suppress a genuine connection. There is often a quiet but profound internal rearrangement taking place. The suppression itself is part of the process. The resistance itself is part of the transformation, because in trying to deny what they feel, this person is being forced into a confrontation with their own inner world that they would not have chosen voluntarily. The feelings they are trying to contain are pressing against the edges of whatever defenses they have constructed, and that pressure, maintained over time, is exactly what Jung described as the conditions necessary for genuine psychological change. The shadow does not reveal itself gently when invited. It announces itself through the cracks in the structures we build to keep it contained. Every time this person encounters something that reminds them of you, every time the feeling they have suppressed rises back to the surface despite their efforts, every time the ironic process of trying not to think about you brings you back into their awareness. In each of those moments, something shifts in them, however slightly. Jung would say that they are not avoiding transformation. They are simply taking the longer path toward it, and longer does not mean never. There is something I want to offer you now that may be the most important part of everything we have discussed. You do not need to do anything with this understanding except receive it. This is not information designed to help you strategize. It is not a map for how to reach this person, how to draw them back, how to use psychological insight to engineer a particular outcome. Carl Jung was deeply suspicious of the ego's desire to control relational outcomes. He understood that the part of us that wants to manage and maneuver is rarely the part of us operating from our deepest wisdom. What this understanding is meant to give you is something quieter and more lasting than strategy. It is meant to give you peace, the peace of understanding that the silence is not what it appears to be, the peace of knowing that you have not been erased from someone's inner world simply because they are trying to erase you, the peace of recognizing that the intensity of what passed between you and this person was real, that it was felt on both sides, and that feelings that real do not simply vanish because one person decides they should. Jung would tell you that chasing resolution is one of the ego's most exhausting habits. Real resolution, the kind that actually settles the restlessness inside you, does not come from the other person. It does not come from their acknowledgement, their return, their change of mind. It comes from within, from your own willingness to understand what this connection was truly about, from your own process of integrating the feelings this relationship brought to the surface, from your own act of facing whatever this experience has been trying to show you about yourself. That is the work, and that work belongs entirely to you. Carl Jung lived long enough and worked deeply enough with the full range of human experience to arrive at a truth that took everything else to understand. The most significant journey any of us will ever take is the journey inward, not toward another person, not toward the outcome we want from a relationship, not toward the resolution that another's behavior would provide, inward, toward ourselves. When someone tries to forget you and cannot, it is because you became part of their inner world. You are woven into the fabric of how they understand themselves, whether they choose to acknowledge it or not. But that is their psychology. Yours is something else entirely. Yours is the awareness that is sitting with you right now, in this moment, processing all of this. The part of you that sought out this understanding. The part of you that refused to accept the surface explanation, that sensed there was more beneath the silence and the distance. That awareness is not small. Jung would say it is the most important thing about you. The person trying to forget you is dreaming, as so many of us do, in the comfortable half-sleep of suppression and avoidance. But you are awake. You are asking the harder questions. You are sitting with the uncomfortable feelings rather than running from them. You are choosing to understand rather than to simply react. And that wakefulness, that willingness to look inward honestly, that is where your real power in this situation has always resided. Not in what they choose to do, not in whether they remember you, return to you, or finally allow themselves to feel what they have been suppressing. Your power is in what you choose to do with your own awareness, what you choose to understand, what you choose to integrate, what you choose to grow into through the experience of having loved or connected with someone deeply enough that neither of you can simply forget it. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This experience, however painful, however unresolved it may still feel, is part of your becoming. Let it do its work. Let it show you the depth of your own feeling. Let it reveal the contours of what you truly value in connection. Let it awaken you to whatever it came into your life to awaken. And trust that what is real, what was genuinely felt, what belongs to the truth of two people's inner worlds, does not need to be chased. It finds its own way, because what is suppressed persists, and what is true, on some level, always surfaces. That is not sentiment. That is Carl Jung, and that is the gift this strange and difficult and deeply human situation has brought to your door. Thank you for spending this time in reflection. If this message reached something real in you, share it with someone who may need to hear it. And if you are ready to go deeper into the hidden language of the human psyche, subscribe and stay with us. The next layer is always waiting.